So the Wildlife Atlas is out. Here you go. 2 copies in the library. If you're having trouble sleeping, you're allowed to borrow one. There you go. And it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration because I was concerned about how few Sabah voices get published. And everyone's Malu. And they have huge amounts of knowledge. And it disturbed me. So, so as much as I could, I nagged people. I only had people writing who had done research in Sabah. And I wanted it to be a book for Sabah. So it's not published with some international publisher. It's not for sale. There's no price on it. It's intended as a reference book for Sabahans, especially those in government with responsibility for managing national parks, forest reserves, also for researchers. And it's being translated into Malay at the minute. And wonderful Henry, who's 4th along on the top line, has agreed to read the whole of the Malay version. And so by April, we'll have, I think, about 500 or 600 copies then. If you want copies, you have to get in touch with WF Malaysia. I don't have any, and it's not in the shops. These are the pictures of the people who contributed in various ways, mostly as authors and co-authors. But I have to flag up Suzuka there and Addy there. Very Hollywood photo of Addy, I thought. And Jane, who's second along at the top row, who the team in WF who pulled it all together. And it is actually beautiful. I've had it for a month, and it's a beautiful book. It was not intended to be a beautiful book, but it's turned out like that. So I'm very pleased with it. So as I say, it's a little bit of kind of Glynn's thoughts. The driving concern was that 40 years ago, John Payne and I did a survey of all of Sabah as much as we could then. And lots of what we found out and what we felt we knew at that time has been forgotten. So I got somebody in the UK, an intern, to spend 3 months copying all of the field notes from that time into an Excel spreadsheet. So now you can believe it because it's digital. But before it was only handwritten, so you couldn't believe it. So now it's digital. And then lots and lots of other people put data in. So we have that from sort of government and NGOs, researchers, government departments, but also we're starting to get private sector. So where you have certified timber or certified oil palm, you have to do what they call HCV, High Conservation Value Assessments. And they've been very generous about sharing their data as well. So the idea was just everyone to share their data. We end up with 175,000 records, of which only 22 are from WWF, 22,000. So just to have a sense of how much others put in to the data. And then it's all organized. So that was the WF team did that. And now we're hoping to transfer it all to the Sabah Biodiversity Center. So the data is not, other than the 22,000 that WF collected, it is not WF's data. It belongs to whoever collected it. And we're just curating it. Oops. Okay. So on the left is the front page of the formal survey of Sabah 1982. And that is the page from that. So it's exactly 40 years between the two documents. And down in the bottom right, just want to share this with people in my age cohort. We had maps which we colored in with rotring pens and a little stencil. So we did all of that there, and you knew exactly what you were coloring. Now it's all zapped by some marvelous GIS system, which is the pictures on the top. So that's the kind of 40 years, the data. And so nothing has changed in the field. So that is 1980, and that is 2000. Of course, the person is exactly the same, as you can tell. The camping, equally sophisticated and very expensive equipment, as you can tell. The guys, all great. And I show that because in that 40 years, the world has been changed by the camera trap. And the bulk of those 175,000 records are camera trap records. But camera traps almost entirely are set at 1.5 meters high. And the rainforest goes up to 80 meters high. So I have tried to use the data that we gathered in this way, looking up in the trees and on the things which are getting less attention now because camera trapping records and research, which is very good, but it's sort of eclipsing all those other things that are higher up and you don't get in a camera trap. So just a little grumpy old man comment, sorry. So, starting on the forest floor, two species of mouse deer. And I'd always wondered, so what's the difference? You've got the lesser and the greater mouse deer slightly larger. What is the difference? And you don't see many of them walking around. It's almost entirely camera trap data. And we got the most fantastic picture from Ollie Worms up there, who just greater mouse deer, who owns the forest. Just has that feeling. Here's a female with a young. Key thing here, it's not very clear, is it's in the daytime. So the lesser mouse deer, much more diurnal, traveling around in the daytime. They all have very small home ranges. And I'm sharing sort of what I've learned because Matsubishi wrote that chapter. Japanese researchers done a PhD on mouse deers. And they depend a lot on fallen fruits, the abundance of them higher where there are big trees which drop fruit at different seasons. So both species depend on them, but both feed a lot on mushrooms and dead leaves. So they're the only animal I know that eats dead leaves, which I would not have put as a highly nutritious substrate. So that's really needs some understanding. I just can't explain it. It does mean that they can get through seasons when the fruits are not available and so forth. But I just found that extraordinary. The ecological difference that comes from the, so you can see they're sort of evenly distributed. The bluey and mauve are the more recent records, and the red and yellow are, so each color is 10 years on the dots there. So red is from 1960 and before, and then blue and mauve is recent. So firstly, lots and lots of camera traps are in the east, are in Danam, Sabah, So the picture is slightly biased by where we looked, rather than a nicely random sample across everywhere. Nonetheless, the white is all the oil palm plantations, and you don't get mouse deers in oil palm plantations, basically. You know, little patches are coming in, but basically they don't like it. They don't like the dogs, they don't like the hunting, they don't get the right food there. In terms of log forest, lesser mouse deer were about a third than in unlogged forest. So they benefited from the opening up of the camp. The greater mouse deer was about a third less after logging. So there's something completely different between the two of them, and the greater seems to need close canopy forest less tolerant of change. So I found that interesting. Now these guys are fantastic. So they're the key jack or muntjac, however you want to name them. The two species. This guy with the really tough horns on the right. This is the red, and you see the antlers have got a double spike. The antlers on the yellow have just got a single spike.
Yellow symbol.
This is a bit yellowy. Actually, when you see them in the forest, I can never tell the difference. Everyone seems to tell them. They all look a bit reddy. So this is the Bornean yellow muntjac, and that is the red muntjac. This is, as the name implies, restricted to Borneo, and the red subspecies go from Borneo all the way to the Himalayas. So pretty adaptable, and probably more recently evolved. Hence the two spikes on the end. So if you look at the distribution now, here these are data mostly from Andrew Hearn, who is studying clouded leopards. So we've got lots of camera traps. Each circle in the map here is about 1,000 photographs of muntjac, both species. And you can see the yellow is the yellow muntjac, just to be helpful. And some areas that I'm not understand, am I? Anyway, some areas they are Sapilok, Kinabatangan, Durimakot, they're the only species. And then as you get into the uplands and also logged areas, you get them mixing more. And then in the Crocker Range and Kinabalu and stuff, they're almost entirely. So you've got a separation right there. The larger red one is more mountainous and does better with log forest. So that shows on the graph above. The yellow in Ulu Sagama is declining from unlogged to logged and declines further at the higher altitude from unlogged to logged. So the yellow bars are all sort of going down and the red bars are doing the opposite. That's a combination of logging and altitude. So I didn't know that before we did that. Here's the Sabah deer. They are everywhere, and they particularly like football fields in the middle of nowhere late at night. They are a fantastic prey item, favored item for hunters, but they're still pretty widely distributed. Here's a female with a calf, and just to see, they have what's called a sore spot on their neck, which is a gland that just opens up and sort of seeps a bit here. So it's just clear on that camera trap image there. And this is one from actually a picture from Sarawak. So quite common, nothing particularly new came out of that chapter. Oopsie, Banteng. So Banteng risked being the next Sumatran rhinoceros for Sabah. So they are large, they are relatively slow breeding, they are targeted by hunters. And this map here was produced by Penny, who's writing the chapter on the Banteng after a sort of 3 or 4 year study. So you have these populations. Tabin probably has the biggest single population, about 50 individuals. And then you have quite wide ranging in the central forests, Sagama, Danam area, and then the Maliau, Calabacan area. And then there's in Sipitang some that go up and down the valleys there, not quite sure how many. So none of that's, we don't have good numbers for that, but best estimate is 350, 370 for summer. And you could wipe them out in little populations just if a few hunters went in. What we did find is a little square triangle, which is a population in Tawau and Ulu Kulumpang. So that's a new record. Yeah, is it me or is it? Right. Strange chance for people to call in. Thank you. So that's Banteng. We're certainly Bora, John Payne and Bora are looking at how to improve the pasture in Tabin. They obviously don't need trees. They don't live in trees. They need pasture. So although we talk about forests and conservation, forest is really an area of protection and safety. They need fallen fruits and pasture to sustain themselves. And I don't think we understand their biology well enough to really know how to up their numbers in the face of hunter pressure. Bearded pigs, doesn't come very well. Anyway, there were hundreds of thousands of them. I don't know if millions, but anyway, hundreds of thousands, despite them being reported as vulnerable or endangered for Sabah by IUCN, something I never understood. So they make nests. There are various nests there where the females produce their piglets, and they have lots of pig wallows. So those are all the ways we see them, as well as camera trap photos, widespread, and actually pretty abundant in oil palm plantations, and a major source of meat for hunters, for urban centers. So lots of the concern about, urban hunting and markets for bearded pig, I think we underestimated how much they love fallen oil palm fruit, how big a pest they are for oil palm plantations, and that actually you could reduce crop losses and have quite a good harvest for urban centers without going to the forest, just where the pigs are going and crop rates. That was before African swine fever hit. So that was 2 years ago now, and hundreds of thousands died. In Tabin, all those wallows there are just full of leaves. You just can't find any signs of the bearded pigs. There's a few records of them coming back, so I'm optimistic, and they can breed extraordinarily. But anyway, let's see what happens. But all that supply of pork going into the plantations. So talking to the plantation owners, they're really happy. So their crop losses stopped because pigs aren't coming in at night and eating. But I don't know what that's going to do to hunting of other species. So there's a nice study there for somebody if they'd like to do. Okay, so now moving up. So that's the kind of forest floor. That's what I thought were the interesting messages. I've not talked about elephants. I've not talked about rhinos. Elephant story has not changed much for actually most of the time, most of that 40 years. We've not known precisely how many there are, and we still don't know precisely how many there are, between 1,000 and 1,500. But most of them, Borneo's elephants, are in Sabah, so I haven't gone into that. What interested me about the orangutans, this is coming out terribly well. So basically they are arboreal, they need trees and fruits and so forth, and they can travel quite large distances to get to different fruiting trees as the seasons change. This picture at the bottom shows a very anxious mother carrying her young one through Sabah softwoods tree plantation between, is there a mark? I'm going to do it anyway. Stay out. Sorry, people there. So it's just here, and they travel. This is all tree plantation, and she's walking between that. It's 14 kilometers. So that I think it offers some optimism that they are pretty adaptable, and they will move to better habitats if they have the opportunity. Dogs are a problem, and particularly a mum like that with a baby is very vulnerable. Looking at the map and the atlas, and it's not terribly clear, but can you see the blue? So the blue is where orangutan nests were not found when they were searched for from a helicopter. And then as you move to the Danam Central and the Durimakot and over to Tabin, you can see the numbers go sort of browner and yellowier, many more nests. So really the orangutan population is quite clumped in that Sagama uplands area and Tabin, and a little bit south into Tawau. But as you move west and it gets higher, I think the main issue is the altitude. Their numbers really drop off. You get the odd male wandering off by themselves. They do travel substantially. There may be another pressure, which is hunting, especially in the sort of Murut lands of the southwest in the past, and possibly along the Crocker Range. We know there's the odd orangutan in Kinabalu Park in the Boring area, but these are just sporadic records. The bulk of the 11,000 orangutans in Sabah is where you can see, and it's all log forest. Almost all of it is log forest. So in the 70s, 80s, when we were looking, we thought there were about 25,000 orangutans in 1980, roughly. We didn't have lots of technology to check. There's now 11,000, and it's fairly clear that 10,000 died for oil palm plantations in the mid-80s, from the 80s to the 2000s. Because you can see between Tabin and Sagama, there's all that oil palm land. That was absolutely fantastic orangutan forest. So that's all gone. As the Kinabatangan researchers have shown, they can hang on in small clumps, but it's not ideal. The bulk needs to be in these log forests of Durermacot and the Sagama. So that's the kind of 40 years of orangutans. You got about half left. 25,000 to 11,000, and that's for Sabah to hold on to or not. And it probably applies to quite a few of the lowland forest dependent species. In 40 years, about half of them gone. The gibbon story is a miracle. So when you're there watching logging going on and seeing these fantastic trees come crashing down, you can't imagine what will survive. In Tabin, after 20 years of natural regeneration, so it was very heavily logged and really bashed about, as anyone who's been there can see, the blue circles in that Tabin area, as you can see where Tabin is, are moderate to high gibbon density. So I did not expect that. I didn't know they would recover from that logging, widespread logging. If I had to, I'd estimate there's probably 100,000 in Sabah, roughly. Their numbers definitely decline with altitude, but in the lowland log forest, they've recovered, and they continue to do that. The yellow figures are the estimates we did in 79, 80, and then the blue figures are in the last 5 years. Much less coverage, but where we have checked in Tower Hills and Tabin and Linkabal, where they haven't really recovered is Durermacot. Although everyone says, well, the narrative about Durermacot is reduced impact logging is good for wildlife. I think the orangutans certainly tolerate it very well, and it's reduced their numbers. But for gibbons, it's halved them at least, where there's active ongoing logging. But they're still there. They're just at lower numbers. They haven't been wiped out because there's no hunting. So that's gibbons. Song of resilience, song of hope. The redleaf monkeys. So they really have not bounced back after logging, and I don't know why. They feed on. Well, hang on, let's just say. So you've got two subspecies, and the records we've accumulated basically show that this paler, orangey one on the right is found south of the Kinabatangan and in the Tawau Tabin area. And then around Malio, it changes, and we don't have records where. And you get to this darker one, which goes all the way up to Sepilok, up to the north, down through Crocker and down to Sarawak. So you've got Sabah endemic subspecies. So this paler one is only found in Sabah, nowhere else in the world. The colors are pretty unstable. So in Tawau, there's a bunch of white ones. There's a little picture there of a white one from Tower in the map. So it's we need a bit of genetics or something to really nail this down because the colors are quite varied. But anyway, so that was interesting to show that block there of the subspecies. And in terms of the impact of logging, so they feed on seeds. These are dry seeds, not succulent seeds like gibbons, not the things we like, taraps and all that. They don't like that. They go for dry seeds from legumes. These are all seeds that they fed on from Sapilok. They break open the seed. They break open the fruit. They eat the seed, and then they throw away the flesh. So we had a captive one, gave it a banana, ate the skin, threw away the flesh. All right. So because they have a stomach like a sheep, they have a sacculated stomach. They have poor stomach fermentation, so they don't eat what we eat, even though they're primates. So and they love young leaves because they can bubble those away in their digestive system. The yellow figures show that they're quite widespread and they do very well in the Bowl, Danam area. They are not and never have been common in Tabin. I don't know why. But they just have not come back after logging. And since they feed on young leaves and things, you think there's lots of young leaves after logging. In fact, it's opened up, we've got more. So I can't explain. Another PhD song. And we know even less about these two. So these are grey leaf monkey species. The one on the right is the Sabah leaf monkey, an endemic species. No one seems to have grasped. We have a unique species of monkey, grey leaf monkey, to Sabah. There's no records in Kalimantan. It's hard to imagine that they all stopped by passport at the border, but it's just remarkable that there are very few records going into Kalimantan. So you have the red dots, okay, are the Sabah leaf, and those are all the records we have. And then you have Hose's leaf monkey, and in 1980 we thought they were sort of on the Crocker Range, and then they were separated by the Keningau and Tambanan Valley. But actually, we just got some records this year from the timber company. This one here of them coming down to a salt lake, and that's those two just in the Whitty Range, just east of Tristan. So actually, it's sort of similar to the redleaf in as much as where's the division of one species from another or one subspecies from another. Malayaw Basin's a big block on species. The Kinabatangan River hasn't blocked the grades. They're on either side of it. So anyway, I think there's just very interesting sort of genetic study to look at what's where and how long has it been there. So the grey leaf monkeys from the current genetics came to Borneo 3 million years ago. So they speciated to 2 species in Sabah. The red leaf monkeys came 1.5 million years ago. Okay. And they've only separated into subspecies because they have less time. What happened 1.5 million years ago when all these red leaf monkeys arrived? And how did the grey leaf monkeys feel about that? Don't know. What we do know is they're the same size, same social system, same diets, so they should all be competing. And it's not clear what pushes one out or the other. So that's 2 grey species and 2 red subspecies, all in the same Dipterocarp forest. They're not on the rivers particularly, not like the silver leaf. So I just kind of wanted to spend a bit of time saying Sabah is really special, and we tried to emphasize that a bit in the atlas with these unique species. So Bornean elephants, 95% of Sabah only. Kalimantan has almost none. Sarawak has absolutely none. Brunei has none. Okay, we've got the Sabah leaf monkey. We've got the subspecies of red leaf monkey, The black squirrel that we get in our gardens, okay, that also stops at the Sabah border. I don't know why, but they do. And then it's a subspecies, so there are other Prevost squirrels which have more gray and more white in them. But the jet black one is the Sabah one. So Fred Sheldon, who's done lots of ornithology and looked at these things, we have a similar thing with the shamas. So the white-rumped shama is found all over Borneo. But in Sabah, we have the white-crowned shama. Same color, except ours has a white crown, only in Sabah. So something has been going on that's isolated things in Sabah. During the ice ages, we know that it was cooler and drier, but that mountainous areas like Kinabalu and so forth, near the sea, which caught the precipitation, held on to forest species, while all around them it was savanna. So we've got, fossils of hyenas. Savanna was the dominant habitat in Borneo, except for these patches where it was wetter. And that's where these things were isolated. Then when it got warmer, forest spread again, and they bumped into each other, but they changed. They were now new species, having had the same ancestor. So that is, I think, what is going on with the leaf monkeys. Fred Sheldon's certainly shown that with various of the birds. But it means Sabah special because it has these remnant ancient populations which are different to the rest of Borneo. The timber boom I talked about, and I've sort of touched on as I've gone through that log forest, which is 80% of Sabah's area, forest area, is really valuable for conservation of the wild. Few species don't do very well, and we're lucky in Sabah. Hunting is not bad. So as long as the habitat's there, most things are okay. After the timber came the oil palm boom, and really the white areas on the maps I've shown you are actually because those species aren't there. We need to do a better job of double checking that. But where studies have been made in palm oil, 80% of the forest species are missing. Elephants are having a good time. They love palms, young palms. They feed on grasses, palms, and bamboos. The problem is you then have human-elephant conflict. And here's some elephants coming into plantation, which they just cleared prior to replanting. Because fire is not allowed, then the chinka-chinka machine is used to chop up the palm stems. And the chinka-chinka machine is like a dinner bell for the elephants. They can hear it miles, so down they come. And this photo was taken when 100 elephants arrived in a single plantation because they wanted to eat these palm stem bits. I think Sabah is very tolerant, and Sabahans don't like newspaper reports of dead elephants. They really don't. The society here doesn't like elephants being killed, doesn't like orangutans being killed, which fills me with hope that people will try and find solutions and not just say, "Oh, well, let's get rid of it." It's coming back and obviously being a guest in other people's country, it is remarkable sense of concern about wildlife for Sabah. So I'm optimistic about that. Even though, and also I think palm oil for Sabah has reached its peak area. There's a little bit more clearing, but I think generally speaking in America, that's enough. The deforestation for palm is not much in Sabah now compared to what it was in the mid-80s. So I'm optimistic there also. I think hunting, we have to be a bit careful. So obviously, poor old rhino went. The banteng, as I've said, I think is next at risk, 300 odd. People are aware of it. And I think the law enforcement and the plantation industry don't want people hunting. It's a generalization. I don't think they'll tolerate people going at night for pigs and so forth, and people may shoot the odd banteng, but basically, people don't want. I think the pangolin, so we're not just chatting about it before the talk. I don't know how they keep coming up with so many pangolins. I never see them. We see signs because they leave their claw marks when they go up to get to the ant nest during surveys. But thousands are captured, exported, caught in illegal stings to try and stop it all, and still they're there. And I don't know where they are. I never see them in the forest. I don't know where they are. But there must be a lot, because so many are being taken and still they're there. But it's a big risk. And I think we need to try and understand that. I mean, it's really interesting. Elisa sort of summarized the data really well in the chapter, but I just think we don't know. We just don't know how to find them properly and track them and put some radio satellite stuff to track them. Don't know what they need. Speak to the old farmers. They say, yeah, there are penguins everywhere. We used to just go and catch them in the farm. So they seem to be, as long as they can eat termites. So palm oil plantations should be pretty nutritious for them. There's lots of termites, but they're easily caught. So, and then this is obviously the rather gruesome Kenningow Market bear paws for sale, and a newspaper report also of someone trying to sell bear paws in the Tanjung Arrow hotels to Chinese tourists in the car park. So that's, I think, Wong concluded that actually we do have sun bears widely over Sabah, but wherever you have a market, a focused market, and people can make some money off it, they can really whack these species, as the rhino has warned us. So I think that's my cautionary bit. And we've got climate change coming. Fire, not so much, at least not at the minute, but flood for sure. I don't have to mention it to anyone living in Phnom Penh. None of us are sure what's going to happen. It's coming. Climate change is happening. They've got records of distribution change of moths on Mount Kinabalu, and some birds have gone up, some birds have come down. So it's equivocal what will happen. I think all you can do in preparation for it is try and keep populations as healthy as possible where they are, and try and make sure they don't get fragmented into pockets. So part of WF's job is to link forest patches with restoration corridors. That will allow species to migrate if they are in an area that is unsuitable for them, over time. We can never catch them all and move them. That's not an option. So we need to try and keep that connectivity open as a response to climate change. But other than that, I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a lot of flooding in the east. That's about it. Sabah's a fantastic place. There you go, pretty pictures, so you can remember what a great state we all live in. Thank you. That's enough from me.
The other three
yeah, I mean, they taste great. They do taste great. There are some rather nauseating photos on Facebook of kind of macho standing with your head on the head of the dead banteng and got your rifle in your hand. So there's that kind of back of a truck, aren't I clever, hunter thing. So I'd say the meat, so if absence of pork because of bearded pig really hits certain traders, I think that risks ramping up that cause of plantain loss. I think people are sort of a bit more embarrassed, and the campaign's working a bit, but I don't have enough details.
So how people can't they be led like deer, but just conservation interests? So
Yep. Yeah. So I think we're starting with the pasture enrichment. It could go to the next stage, and certainly John and Bora would say that should be immediate. Talking to Zainal, Dr. Zainal Vet, with Bora, it's difficult to move them. They get I don't know what it's called anyway, shock, an anaphylactic shock if you move them around. As adults, you need to move them as calves. So that limits your options of catching them and moving them. It is being looked at. It needs to be looked at with more urgency. I think having captive herds would be pretty easy to maintain once you've got the stock, but we haven't yet got stock. There is also a little bit of risk of hybridization with cattle, which are increasingly put in plantations, which would be a conservation issue. Yeah, captive breeding, pasture improvement, stock balancing. Yes, of course. Yeah. So I've only spoken to 2, so I'm not a reliable source. Dogs, they have the little kampong hunting dogs. They train them up, and that's how they go after them. In the 2 cases I've spoken, but there are lots of people who say, "Oh, I just found it." This guy got one on the back of his motorbike. Just crossing, So I can't tell you. They are an intriguing story, because going back to the 60s, they've been exported from Sabah in fairly substantial numbers. They don't strike me as fast breeders. These are saying it's just kind of 1 offspring at a time, maybe 2. But how they manage to sustain a population when all these are being taken off, I don't know. Don't know. I don't know. It's not something, not in the atlas. Everything's in here. Otherwise, I don't know. But it's really intriguing. I mean, there are records just in Annam, and they kind of bump into people's caboons and they bumble around a bit. How they then just disappear, you can't see them. You never see them on survey. Just hugely annoying. Yeah, Sylvie.
Look at your maps in the way that.
Yeah.
Also, having research the other thing.
Yes.
Or no camera the other thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how, in a way, we must remember that these maps are not. They're absolute.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, they're partial in their sampling. So the conclusions yes, I kind of said at the beginning, but it's definitely worth saying again. But there have been enough studies just to look at what is the population in oil palm plantations, not spread over lots of them, but a few in Tinkayu and in the SAFE project program. And that doesn't change the picture. Those results don't change the picture, but actually they're not there over a large area. So you have leopard cats are widespread. The pangolin and island palms are there, widespread. The pigs are widespread. So they would be. So the pig map definitely understates how many are going into plantations. They don't seem to live there. They seem to go in from forest patches, even quite small ones, and then go back in the daytime. So we can list those, but it's a small percentage of the total number of species. Yes, yep. And so, yeah, I mean, thank you. Absolutely. It's the database is there. We're putting in about 1,000 records a month. So it's live and it will continue. There's only 31 species. So as I said when we launched it, I'm looking forward to someone producing the next volume. It'll half kill them, but it's worth it for all the species that are on it. Lots and lots. Lots of carnivores. I haven't mentioned carnivores. You know, so we just keep bringing. I mean, there are fewer records, so it's harder to make a picture. But no, let's keep it going. That's why we're trying to get into the biodiversity center, and we have a staff post, which federal funding has been made available to transfer the data and keep adding. And they're in the middle of trying to produce an app for us all to have on our telephones. So if we have any photo of any wildlife, we can send it into the Wildlife Atlas database. So the data, I'm hoping, will be rolling. I don't want it to stop, like, you know, like that's the end of the book. This is actually the advertisement for the database, which is much bigger than this and keeps on rolling. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so for the elephants, we've got, I don't know how many, 30, 40 with satellite collars on, giving off data. Well, some continuously, depends how expensive it is, but necessarily 3 or 4 times a day. And we have maps of those matriarchal groups. And they follow a fairly discrete pattern, as you'd expect, with occasional, especially bulls going on these sort of round tours. They're a bit like the orangutans, they don't go very far west. And they're in the southern, southeastern, south central part of Sabah.
That's GPS tracking. What about satellite imaging?
So the imaging, so you can't, so I think thermal imaging might get some, but actually it doesn't take much tree crown to just drop them out. You can't see them. The only thing that goes up is that GPS signal goes through the foliage. Very hard, and they stay cool out of the sunlight, and safer non-human air and then coming in the night time, especially, unless they hear the chinka chinka. They come out in the daytime as well.
It will be interesting to overlay those maps with linear infrastructure.
Yes. Yep. I haven't even talked about it, but it is the problem of fragmentation, and will exacerbate climate change impacts by having fragments of forest stuck, disconnected to better areas, for sure. And for the larger planting and so forth, will really disrupt their movements, their longer range movements. Orangutans also. So we're looking forward to lots of overpasses and underpasses for wildlife, which are standard in China. You know, India now has a whole manual for the whole country on wildlife underpasses and overpasses to allow that connectivity. So looking forward to Sabah doing that.
Are we promoting it, or is it
well, I mean, I think we should all be promoting, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think there's no way infrastructure is going to stop, but you can do it well or badly. And there's enough lessons from saluted elephants and so forth to say, you don't have to do it like this. And the engineers say, excuse to those, apologies to those in the room, but the engineers say, basically, if they know early enough, they can design it in at not a huge percentage increase, The problem is it comes up of EIA when they've done all their designing, and it'll cost a fortune to change it all. So it's trying to get ahead in the design, let the engineers, and they say, no one told us.
Why in many parts of the world
Yeah, yeah. So we like to encourage that, but anyway, it's not on people's radar.
it's suggested here.
Yeah, yeah.
There are land interests.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of then depend on the donor, the financer of the road demanding as part of the contract. Yeah. I mean, I think people, there are vested interests, but I think generally people aren't against it, but it's just not in the thinking. Needs to be, plugged in at lots of levels into the campaigning. Yes. Yeah, yeah, but then implementation. Yeah, both. Yeah, yeah. 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 Yeah.
But it's just a matter of pushing it up because perhaps at that level they have thought this.
Yeah.
But once they accept it,
yeah,
I don't think.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, so there you go. There's a seminar for the Sabah Society. Yes, yes. Yeah, and also from campaigning group like ourselves, it's the donors, the banks, the financing institutions, saying they won't release the funds unless they have these documents. So you've got to, better to have them both. Everything is in there. Everything is in there where we have it and where people wanted to share it. I have to say there has been a culture of defensiveness about one's data. Okay, so we spent a lot of time working on that and writing letters, promising WWF wouldn't walk off with other people's data. And I'd say probably a dozen people with a lot of data said, okay. And they are the bulk of the records. We've taken old museum specimen records in, and that can continue. And I showed all the photos of the people, but just to appreciate that people, particularly academics who are measured by their publications, were pretty generous to say, okay, here it is, and this particular terms. And I'm very clear that these data are ours. 22,000 of WWF Malaysia's. The rest we are curating on behalf of. And if anyone wants them, then we'll tell them whose data they are. And they can go and ask directly. We're not a clearinghouse. So that, yeah. I hope we can keep that culture of sharing the data, because it's kind of nonsense. I mean, in the end, the data never gets used. It just is, like 10% gets published. And some of the best records we had for the barking in the Kijang are actually from clouded leopard stuff, because it's byproduct. Yeah.
If only 10% gets published, why is the other 90% correct?
Well, okay, so you're searching for clouded leopards. You put out 100 camera traps. You get 20. Yeah, so that's all put out there, and you've got it on your clouded leopard research grant. But you photograph everything. So you'll have your 20 clouded leopards shots. Like it, yeah. So that's the one major source of it, and the other is. When I did my PhD, I just gathered as much information I could, because I only had a year and a half, 2 years, two years. Don't you start now, Bob? And how much of that did I really use? Probably 30, 40%. I mean, it was a different kind of data, but you're often not sure what data you will need or what question you'll be able to answer. So you gather more. I think distribution data is less contentious in that sense. But if we wanted more information on population abundance, some of which I put in there, then people get jumpy. And yet that's what you need. You need to do the population job, not just what was the distribution.
So I understand that the system that sometimes they can add or pregnant. Was the app available to?
Okay, so yes, so hey, we're into citizen science here. A big buzz at the minute, and it's Suzika and Jane were here that are telling me off for not broadcasting it loudly. So this app is being produced by the Sabah Biodiversity Center. We're helping them with it, and they're testing it. We took it to the Borneo Bird Fair in Sepilok, got some birders to have a go. They all didn't like it. So good test, hard to use, didn't have the right whatever you need, you know, blah blah blah. So it's gone back in, and they have another. You know, I mean, to make a good app is it's an ongoing process, but it's you really got to know what you're doing. It's not just we'll just sort of chuck a button. It's really difficult. So if that's the case, it's not going to work for general citizen science. The biggest risk is inaccurate information, you know, which just destroy a database because you don't know what's right and wrong, and then the whole thing's not usable. So we have been religious in throwing out any uncertain record, and the team still think I'm balmy. Everything I said, no, just get rid of it. Yeah, but we're not sure. Get rid of it. So you start citizen science sending stuff in. You need a quality filter. So it's not just the app. Well, if they send photos, okay, but hopefully no one takes a photo there and says they found it. All that. It's difficult. You know, unless you have very techy people checking. So all that needs to be sorted out. In the meantime, any records you do have, let Suzika Dwaling know in WFUK. She'll stick it in the database for you, against your name. I know it's in. I think contacts in the. But I know. I just hope that you know we've left something that can be built, can be analyzed more thoroughly for different species, can inform environmental impact assessments, you know, and so forth. That's what I hope.
I do believe that you involve people and then encourage them to report policy, vision,
Yeah.
then they'll be more connected.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I also hope that the conservation science community that came together around this helps that voice as well.
I think there are no questions of the Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no questions, thank you very much. Yeah, you can take it off.
Ah!
Thank you. So we want to miss you.